Sunday, another respect. Hope you all had a great week. I know I did. Another busy week, and there's certainly a hell of a lot of things going on, made it an even busier week. So, we got a lot to talk about tonight. And tonight's theme is basically spread around the fact that a lot of us here tend to get it, but there are a lot of people who claim to be awake who really just don't get it. They really don't get it. And so, what better person to try and explain all that to everybody than the only person who brings the facts and the receipts to the table, because it's all in black and white. So, without further ado, here's my good buddy, Derek Jonhson. Whoop, there you are. How you doing, kiddo?
Well, man, I couldn't be better, but that's just me. Yeah.
So, we've had a busy week. We've had a busy bunch of weeks. And we watch with the government shutdown and people screaming from both sides about what the president can and can't do. And at every turn, especially with a lot of these federal judges and local judges who think that they can stop a presidential order. And they go and they put this stuff out and immediately get knocked down. Let's give a simple explanation to the people as to why this is his game. He's got the authority to do what he chooses to do.
Well, I mean, everybody that says he can't, whether you're in the, visual political arena, what people think is real time, which is not, but, or if you're just an average everyday American, wherever you are, whatever bracket you are, if you're saying that, then you're still captured and controlled by what the deep state had set up. Right, when they use their terms democracy, well, it was a democracy what they established after 1871. They established a democracy. They did, yes. We, the United States of America, is a constitutional republic. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. What they have done is so simple in another manner, where they have, they preyed, PREYED, preyed on the American people who didn't know laws and orders, but also just our simple origin, foundation, and history of the United States of America. They have preyed on that many people. So the people who are saying that, if you're especially if you're not in government at any capacity, if you're saying that, you're really captured in control. But then the people who are saying that, like the governors and the mayors, it's only a few of them, first off. The only ones saying that are the governors of Democratic cities, right? It's not any other governor or mayor. So you're actually looking and focusing in on what you're supposed to, but you're not seeing and hearing what you're supposed to know, because what you're focused on is what the verbiage you think you knew and the terminology you think you knew of days of old. The president, all right, is established in the Constitution what the president's role is. He's to enforce the laws. If they were unconstitutional or against the law, which that's an oxymoron in another kind of manner, but the supreme law of the land is the Constitution, and then it has laws under it that's been passed through the years as prescribed in the original Constitution. Well, however you want to look at it, however you want to split that hair, if you're going to call something unconstitutional, you probably need to know what's constitutional, right? So against the law, that slogan, no one's above the law. Well, in order to be under the law, you probably still need to know the law. If you're going to yell against the law, you still need to know what is the law. And, it's like a two-way street to look at it. One, I always bring up the dash, right? This is your visual, right? So this is a strategic operation, special operation, using unconventional warfare and irregular warfare tactics. So that's that portion. And then what everybody's seeing, what you're watching, is that operation. All right. The other side, what I call the target audience that's receiving it, thinking it's real time, and what they think they're looking at is real time, right? All that aspect of it, Depends on what side of the aisle you're on. It depends on if you're a Republican, conservative, or Democrat, liberal. If you're a Democrat liberal, though, you're spewing all these things against the law, the Constitution is being violated, and all these things. If you're a Republican, conservative, patriot, MAGA, you're supposed to know that dash and what it means. All right, you're supposed to know that. But what a lot of Republicans are doing, they're almost looking like Democrats, liberals, just slightly different verbiage. But questioning, oh, is President Trump really in charge? Is he being controlled by Netanyahu? Is he being controlled by this? And oh, this looks like the Antichrist. And oh, this is setting up for that in 400 million years. And I mean, and I'm like, okay, well, look, even something like that. Well, what are you doing about it? You're just sitting back and taking it. Even if it was setting that up, you're sitting back and taking it. You're not doing anything about it in the first place, right? So someone like me, if that was the case down the road, I'm still in the know, prepared, ammo everywhere, guns all in my house, set up everything in the South, right? We have dirt roads that lead here and dirt roads that lead there, and we have cubby holes for this and underground for that. Well, if we had to flank, we could. You can't. All you're doing is sitting back and taking it no matter what. All right, flanking means that if we're going along, going, and all of a sudden something changes or somebody changes, we can flank and handle that as we get there. That old saying, we'll burn that bridge when we get there. Well, we'll burn that bridge if and when we get there. But as of right now, that's not what it looks like. So the people that need to know that, the Republican, conservative, patriot, MAGA, when you know that, it don't look like that. It don't paint nowhere remotely close to that picture. This is us taking down the evil, and the evil on the spiritual warfare and the evil on the informational warfare that's capturing and controlling you. Now, the Democrats, liberals, there may be some good ones still left in that bunch because they're brainwashed and controlled just on the other spectrum. But again, the laws and the orders, you hear it over and over and over. I'm not a law and order guy just because it's all laws and orders. There's a lot of laws that don't need to be on paper. They need to be abolished. They need to be terminated. Same thing with orders that's been in place for years. Executive orders. President Trump's had to go through all the diplomacy of the quote unquote democracy that these people established and bust that. Now, right out the gate, 3 or 4 years ago, a lot of us veterans that knew what was going on, naturally we would sit around, we would talk, and we would talk on our levels what we thought the commanders were doing and going to do in the future. And 3, 4, 5 years ago, we would talk and go, man, you know what? That'd be cool if they do this, and this. Well, this, and this that we were conversating about 3 and 4 years ago, me and the people that I know that are, some are in operations, some aren't. We would sit and talk about how it'd be cool if they showed you a puppet government and then they take them out visually. But then, strategically and humanitarianly, really, the ultimate goal, again, is people at the end of the day. The people who want to be involved the right way, the people who want to be on board the right way, and the people who know how to maintain and sustain as God commands. Now, I'm not a preacher. I'm not a pastor, evangelist, none of those things. But in the Bible, it does tell us to be stewards of the earth, meaning to pass it forward. Take this, same thing. I'm Native American. My grandfather was Native American. All right, Native Americans do a 7-generational lookout. So you operate right now looking forward 7 generations. So you're preparing for that 7th generation to pick up everything that your steward, what you're doing right now, what you're planting, what you're harvesting, etc. Right? So if every person will take, Americans don't live like that. You don't live like that at all. You live for right now. You're existing. You're not living. You're just existing. That ain't the way to be. So many people on a daily are even neglecting your family, your friends, your spouse, your kids, or whatever. And you're also not even taking time for yourself. Some of you, you're not going hiking, golfing, hunting, fishing, whatever it may be, pickleball, knitting, crocheting, whatever you do. You're not even taking time for yourself because you're so just locked into this phone, and it's just kind of like that image of the phone where it's like wrapped around someone's face. And data shows this. Data shows the average American 8 hours a day on their phone, just locked in, right? And so even when I grew up, we didn't have those cell phones. We didn't have computers like that. We didn't have any of that. right? You still had to communicate. You knew who not to say something to at school because you might get your teeth knocked down your throat. All right. You knew who not to tick off or that, right? And then if you did have the spine, I'll use those terms and for the lady's sake, if you did have a spine and you did want to say something to somebody, then you went up to them and you said it to their face, right? And if you did say it to their face and you went around their back and you said something about them and that person found out, that person normally had the spine to confront you on it and say, hey, you got something to say? Put it right here. All right. You want to be a champ? Then fight like one. All right. So we got to get back to those. And I'm not a believer in just fighting, fist fighting, but we got to get back to those days of putting the law back into people and putting the fear of God back into people. And that's what President Donald John Trump, they had to do it this way. Now, I love it this way because when you look at the big picture, the 45-47, and you look at every intricate detail, what's cool about it is that it sets for all of humanity who wants to be a part of it. It sets up for every walk of life all over the world, every nationality, every ethnicity, anybody who is a good person, good heart, even if they can't even understand Alabama or Texas slang. Someone out there is going, you know what? I get the bits and pieces of this guy and these people who are doing that. Everybody all over the world, how can I have books that are selling like they do if people aren't comprehending it? They are comprehending it and they're realizing, you know what? I identify with this. I am a good person. I have a good heart. I have a good fight. And people all over the world, how can we all talk different, look different, think a little bit differently, but all have the same goal and mission? It shows this is a biblical operation going on, spiritual operation, all right, and then humanitarian, and works its way down. So what President Trump and them are doing, the long-term effects, the short little hiccups are part of it. But if you knew the 45-47 with the strategic plan, the strategic operation, the special operation, the laws and orders that fit that and fit that only, not all the other stuff, but that, the bigger picture and the little hiccups along the way, the hiccups are all choreographed. See, once people learn that the law is a strategic plan and it's a strategic special operation, then you'll see that all these little things that the target audience is falling for because they hadn't heard me yet or someone like all of us that are doing this, until they know that, then they're going to fall for those because they're in the target audience, right? And they may never hear me. They may never hear the book until after the whole thing's over. But the ones that can, you can escape all the drama, the propaganda, the noise, and you can get over here on the good side and go, man. And then when you see something hit the TV, when you know that foundation, you're like, oh, that makes sense because that plays into this. Because everything that hits TV or news, whatever you want to look at, I can show you every aspect of it that's in a law somewhere with President Trump, a new order in place from 2017 to present day. There's something that backs every single thing. But it's not as complicated as you'd think once you learn that formula or the blueprint, as I call it. So the end goal actually worked out better to where they did use a puppet government. When people thought Joe Biden was real, that was a puppet government. It's a World War II tactic. It's already been used in the world. It's not old fogey. It may sound old fogey, but it's not. It's been used. It's not a conspiracy like some people say. It's a strategy and a tactic that's been used in unconventional warfare, unconventional for a reason, not conventional, and irregular warfare, not regular, but irregular warfare for a reason. All right. And then you get to clean out from top to bottom. And we were talking about like top to bottom. Right? We're talking about the very top all the way down to I asked my dad one time, that's just so funny. I said, I've never told this. This is my dad, I swear he's got the best humor. But I had a grandmother who was a saint of a saint. In my 40-year, she passed it when I was 36. But in all of my years, I had never once heard my grandmother raise her voice or say a cuss word. All right. And I'm talking about ever. Now, my mother, I won't give her age away, but my mother at the time of my grandmother's passing was up in past her 50s. Let's just say it that way. And my mother said in all of her years, she had never heard my grandmother raise her voice one time or say one single cuss word, one single swear word. So I asked my dad one time, I said, what's it mean if grandma's not in heaven? He said, me and you gonna be licking the cracks of hell. All right. Well, when you picture that visual, like literally the cracks of hell, when we talk about top to bottom clean out, we're talking about the very top of the top where you're touching the ceiling of heaven all the way down to the cracks of the dirtiest, lowest levels that we're operating with this evil. That is what has been taking place. And the laws show that with the trafficking and all forms of trafficking. All these Venezuelan strikes right now are all back in a command that was put into place. The order was put in April 1st, 2020. So all these things are way back here. So when you look at the bigger end goal picture, you know, it's a perfect strategy. You gave President Trump 4 years here. You use a tactic that everybody forgotten about, civilians, or maybe didn't even know about, obviously, pulling back, all right, to them pulling back. To me, us, the military, knows what's going on. He wasn't a pullback, all right. It was all a unconventional warfare tactic. He gets 4 more years that way, which is still lawfully, but it's military law. It's not necessarily federal. It's all military. But then you come back up here and you give him 4 more visuals. So you get 12 to do what would have taken 8 to the average American. All right. So, and then you worry about revealing that later. Revealing it later will be a lot better because then people are going to be happy when taxes are eliminated, when all the stress and anxiety and all this just mudslinging is quelled and dissipated. When you see all the money coming back in, when you see your bank accounts going up, when you see the taxes eliminated, when you see all these things, when you visually see that effect in your pocketbook, you'll become a believer. Oh yeah, you will. Because hey, when it's coming in your pocketbook and it's affecting you, but especially your children in your lives, in your daily lives, oh yeah, you're going to be a believer in it. And you're not going to want to go back because then you'll have evidence of what was and what is. And you'll know what is was that impossible that the deep state said was impossible. No, it was possible. All right. So everything that President Trump said, Obama said, oh, does he have a magic wand? He can just bring all the. Well, we got a magic wand. All right. It looks like probably a lot bigger than what Roosevelt ever mentioned with walking around with a big stick, right? Speak softly, carry a big stick. Oh, it's a lot bigger than a stick. And then all these nations that capitulated, like all these people up in arms over Israel and Qatar. You have no idea what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. All right. When Israel took place, when the October 7th, 2023, in 1 week's time, 1 week, all these nations were in Israel: Romania, Bulgaria, Argentina, Tunisia, Algeria, New Zealand, Thailand, Japan, Russia, Ukraine, Mexico, Colombia, United States, Canada, Sweden, Germany, Belgium, Hungary. All right. Most of you can't even put that on a map, ladies and gentlemen. All of those nations were in Israel from October the 7th to the 14th. Did you hear me? Russia and Ukraine, I thought they were in a war with each other. What were their military doing in Israel in the first week? Did you hear United States? What did you hear, quote unquote, Joe and Kamala say back then? What did they say? Oh, we're not going to have any troops in Israel. We most certainly had troops in the Gaza Strip and in Israel. All right. So that comes with knowing military laws, military orders, and following your commander in chief who's working with laws and orders. All right. So all this stuff is a continuous operation. That is the dash. That's but we're in the 47 portion now. But see, all this was a continuous operation, and it's so genius. And it's also proven to people that you're just not built for the long haul. All right. You might be and don't realize it. Right. But we're trying to get you to divorce your emotions, divorce your feelings, and then attach you in on what the military is using. All right. you can't say Trump was right about everything. You can't say that, post that, wear that if you don't believe that he's in control of everything. He's in command of everything. He's the face of it. Now, it's a lot of generals and a lot of admirals back there. Not just men, ladies. We have women who are generals and also a few admirals. So there's a lot of people a part of this. And all those nations that capitulated, every one of those nations that were in Israel were capitulation nations. They're also part of NATO that came on board. They're the ones that went up from 2% to 5%. All these things. Then the continuation of walking in front of the queen, now walking in front of the king. I mean, you have a continuation of all these things. So, you know, you don't want to look like a Democrat or a liberal. All right. Now, they still are savable, the ones that'll listen, and you should want to save them. And it's tough. I get it. I mean, they'll make you want to claw a chalkboard. But you remember those days? Man, who grew up with a chalkboard? Remember those things? Man, you had that one kid with the long nails that would go up there and just, right? So think about it, right? You know, so it's all a strategic plan, special operation, and, you know, all these governors, all this that's the distraction and takedown. That's also getting people to go read the law in that capacity, because you may not have heard of me yet or someone like me. And that gets other people in the target audience to go, you know what, I'm going to go read the Insurrection Act. I'm going to see what it says. But they also need to find the Posse Comitatus. They're going to need to find Joint Publication 3-57. They got to go look at some other laws and orders in there, but at least it'll get them, you know, in a ballpark of going to go reading and looking up and going, well, let's see what it says. And but the other flip side is they got to get in to see when it was written, 1807, which was before the British revolted in 1812. So see, a lot of Americans just don't know the strategic part of this as well from that angle, and seeing that you got to look at our founders, and a lot of this stuff does need reformed, but reform the correct way. And that's what President Trump and them talk about with the ratification. And that's why you're hearing about a convention. There's 27 states that have signed on for the convention. You need 34. So, you know, that's going to happen. They're talking about it. That means it's going to happen. And then you had John Bolton, who's about to be indicted. All right. But you had John Bolton last February in 2024 on CNN. And the question was posed specifically, can President Trump serve a second term with all these lawsuits on him? You got to listen to Bolton. He goes, well, the Constitution specifically bars the president from serving a third term. But knowing Trump like I know him, he's going to seek to ratify the Constitution to stay in power. Woo! See, they're telling everybody. Now, the way he said it would sound harsh to someone that don't know what's going on lawfully, and it would sound like he's taking a shot at President Trump to stay in power. Nah, the law says what it says. And then also all these laws with the military, if they were against the law or against the Constitution, why are they still in law? So see, if Democrats and liberals thought this was real, then they should be mad at the Congresses of past who kept these laws in place for the president to enforce, because that's his number one role. It's not to write the law, pass the law. President don't do that. He is to enforce the laws that are on the paper. So therefore, to know what's constitutional, to know what's lawful, you got to know those laws and orders. And I can assure you right now, he's the face of it. He's the face, the image, the name, the brand. But it's the generals and the admirals who are running this ship from behind. And President Trump signed up for his name, face. Someone had to be the one that says, I can take the mockery, I can take the hate, I can take the ridicule, I can take all that, and I will sacrifice my days for this. And that's what everybody's witnessing.
I think that's one of the big things people don't tend to understand. And I've always used the analogy with this, that when you look at the military and you look at the president, it's the Rolling Stones and Mick Jagger. The president is Mick Jagger, but he ain't nothing without the military right behind him. And that's what's really running the show. And a lot of people don't understand that. And as you were just talking about, and we started this whole thing about, all of this stuff is in print. But while a lot of people are very, very pro President Trump, and they're very, very pro the military and pro this agenda in trying to take back not just our country, but our world, they're still in that mainstream media mindset where they want to sit right here, watch us, and listen to somebody else tell them, instead of going, when you take your phone, you take your computer, you've got all the information available to you that you could possibly need. But it's like it's too much work. And they don't want to be bothered doing it. And all of these things are available on government websites.
Well, and I get it. From this angle, I get it. It's like, where do you start, right? I get that angle. When people have questions, well, where do I start? How do I start? You know, but at the same time, that is what, and I mean, I do this all the time because I'm like, well, this is where you start, right? And there's a
Carlos,
few,
not to interrupt you, but also
yeah.
the simple fact, why don't people start with the simplest thing, our Constitution?
Well, that's what I tell people. It's like yes, you got to know definitions first before you can move to a paragraph, right? Well, I do it like this. I say a word in a sentence of a paragraph, right? You're not going to get the paragraph and the clause and the instruction of that until you understand the definitions of that. And so then it goes back to, where are you with the words of our government? Some people didn't need to know the words. Some people already knew the words and what they mean. Some people need to just see the clause and what is. So it depends on who you are, and there's no way for us to know who you are out there individually unless we do know you. So you got to go back to, what do you know where you are? So if you know the terms, the words, the glossary, the index, then all you need to know is what President Trump started with, and then what is the overall goal, right? What is that? Well, you need to know what we were faced with. Well, we had trafficking is a big issue, all forms of it, because that was how the deep state funded a lot of different things. All right. And then you had the central banks, right? And then the global alliance of the deep state. How did they operate and function? Right. We have our Federal Reserve and we have a Treasury. You got to know the difference in them and who was using what and what they were doing with it. I mean, there's a few things, yes. So I can understand certain people when they don't realize what that is, but that is our point as well too. If I know at my age and you know at your age, then we're two different age brackets that both know the bigger picture and the intricacies of that picture, then you can know too. So that you got to start somewhere, and I get it from that angle. If you don't know where to start, I do get that, and I'm compassionate with that. But it's when people are out there, oh, that's not. If you're saying it, if that's bullcrap, that's a conspiracy, then you're giving the impression that you know something, but you don't believe it. And but then especially if you're Republican, conservative, patriot, MAGA, you really look worse than the liberals. At least the liberals have no idea. I mean, you can tell they have no earthly idea. It's getting them to see whether they would respect it or not. That's the only thing with that. But Republicans, conservatives, patriots, MAGA, right? You definitely don't want to look like that, because it most certainly is what's taking place. It reads that way. It's prescribed that way. It's being enforced that way. And the visuals show it daily. And then we're at this point, we're at daily. I mean, which we've always been daily, but it's been a lot more weekly and monthly. But now we're in rapid fire where it's just every day. There's something that you can take on True Social from President Trump, the White House, or wherever, and you go, whoop, here's that order. Here's this executive order. Here's this law. Here's that. So I get it from the standpoint of that. But at the same time, what you and I are also saying, I know I harp it too, so I won't throw you under the bus as much. But when I'm getting down on it, I don't think everybody's stupid. I don't think everybody's dumb. I don't think everybody's an idiot or a moron, like the terms I use on my podcast. That's to go, if you are saying these things, only you know who you are out there. If you're saying those, that's for you. And I say this all the time. The better technology gets, the dumber people get, the lazier they get. I mean, when I had to read all this, you had to go to a library and pull a book. You know, remember that little index card? You had to go look at it. Then you had to go find a little thing, and then, okay, it's on this aisle, and it's somewhere down, oh my God, this long line, right? And you had to go find that book, and you had to pull that book. And then the references in the back of the book, you had to read, you have a paragraph, and then in there have little parentheses, and they have all these references. You had to hold your place, write this down, go in the back of the book. Oh, page 47 is this. You had to go flip to 47, right? Read that, and then go back to that original page with the reference point. So see, people just don't realize. That's how I learned everything I learned from the government side of things, was that old school had to do it that way. All right. And it is memorization when it comes to our government and our, 3 branches. That is memorization. That's not something it hasn't changed. The 3 branches are there. They haven't changed. How they function haven't changed. So that is memorization. Orders change, right? Because they're prescriptions of the law. It's like, okay, this order and that order is supposed to be terminated. But as we know, from 1979 to 2016, there were 25 plus executive orders with national emergencies open. And that's what President Trump is also having to clean out. Not only is he having to act in real time with the future, but he's also having to clean out all the deep states, what we call, I call it bullcrap diplomacy, right? Because it wasn't diplomacy, right? That's what was keeping their funds going, right? Their money laundering, their checks and balances. And then they got all the people that fight each other. And when you really look at Americans are fighting over the core values of America: patriotism, race, and religion. And everybody's fighting over the stuff that you're supposed to be different in. We're not all supposed to think alike when it comes to whatever it may be. I tell people all the time, if I die and get to the pearly gates and I was wrong about everything, I still want someone to be like, you know what? But he believed in what he believed in. He never put anybody down. He didn't ridicule someone else for believing in what they believed in. And then someone who might be correct on what they believed in, if it looked that way, they might run up to the gate and be like, vouch for him, let him in, right? That's what we're supposed to look like. And so many people have gotten in this. We just look for the bad in everybody. We look for the negative. And if we can't find anything, we create it. We prefabricate it, which is premeditation, right? How did we get there? So I get it from another standpoint when people say, well, where do I start? How do I start? Well, it depends on where you are. Do you know the 3 branches of government? Do you know how a bill is made into an act? Do you know this, and that? What? Do you know any of those things? If not, then you got to go study that origin. If you do, then all you need is what President Trump is working with. And all you need are the laws and the orders of that visual. And then apply those. Don't worry about anything else right now, because everything that's taking place is a continuity of government. It's a military occupation. Therefore, things like the shutdown, it's not real. It's real to the target audience, but it's not real. It's all pre-planned. It's all strategic. Mainstream media ain't said a word about Hillary, ain't said a word about Bill and their depositions. Hillary was the 9th, Bill's the 14th. No word anywhere about Hillary or Bill, all right, in the Epstein deposition case, right? Nothing about that. So see, everybody's focused on, the target audience will say, focus on the shutdown. Shutdown. Oh, and Israel, and oh, this. No one's even paying attention to what's going on back here. Now, I already know, you already know, that's already pre-planned. It's already been done. All those depositions have already been done. But even the target audience is not even focused on that, and it's been given to you on the .gov site way back in August. Here's all the subpoenas. Here's all the date. They had guys in August, September, October. Eric Holder and Merrick Garland, just in the first part of October, they already have mainstream articles about. No liberal out there is talking about it, because that it busts their whole theory, right? But what did Eric Holder, Merrick Garland, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know who Merrick Garland is, he's the Attorney General, quote unquote, for Biden, who fraudulently, Jack Smith, quote unquote, right? What did these two dudes say? Eric Holder, libtard, and also Merrick Garland, leotard. What did they say? There's no evidence of Epstein files. You think the liberals and Democrats are putting that all over X right now, even the low level? No. And if they did say anything, you know what they'd say? Oh, they're being suppressed. They know they'll be killed or they'll be punished if they be a whistleblower. There's always an excuse, right? But no, that's not the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is going to, man, it's going to be epic. The next from here to July the 4th, you know, I did grow up Pentecostal, so I do still have some ways about me where I feel like I just want to just tear out of here and just dance. You know what I mean? But not being sacrilegious, but you know, still, it's going to be epic.
Oh, it's going to be unbelievable. But so many people, and it goes back to what I had just said. They're still so brainwashed by the mainstream media, and the mainstream media, which is white hat controlled at this point, they're still teasing the same old crap. And teases are the biggest part of the news's draw, because all they're doing is they're casting the line, and they'll use all kinds of misinformation in that tease to make you want to stay tuned until the story comes up, and then you find out it's got nothing to do with what they were teasing. So people are still set in that mindset, and they sit and they watch rather than knowing, A, that they shouldn't be listening to the mainstream media, and B, that if they really, really, truly want to be patriots, shut the damn TV off, because nothing kills them more than a lack of viewers to their sponsors. And those sponsors turn around and say, I'm not paying you $500,000 for 30 seconds. And look how many people you've lost. And it trickles down and it trickles down and it trickles down, and they all go out of business. But people are still trapped in the mindset of, I want to watch my football. I want to watch my baseball. I want to watch my hockey and my basketball. I want to see the news, even if it's just to catch the weather. And those guys could never even get into the Hall of Fame because they can't even be right 1 out of 3 times. So it's a cyclical thing that we're all trying to break, but people won't, for comfort's sake, for fear's sake, won't step away from it. And it's like, where do we go to take that or supply that little push into the realm of going and doing the research, going and pick up a copy of the Constitution. You can download it from the web and sit and read it at your convenience. It's not War and Peace.
I had a little one here. I was going to show if I can find it. I mean, you can get the little bitty ones like this, just like that.
Yep.
Not even big at all. I mean, it's like, you can't, if you don't have the attention span to read that little bitty thing, like, I mean, it's not big at all. I did tell people, you know, and then even if you can't quote it, that's fine. Look, I get people don't have bad memories. Just, you can take that little thing like the Gideon Bible, put it somewhere, put it in your purse. If you're a guy, you can put it in your pocket. You can put it somewhere, keep it in your console of your truck or something. I mean, it's not that big at all. I mean, it's not, right? It's a principle. I live life by principles. I tell people all the time, if you don't have a principle, then you know, and you can be 100% wrong about a principle, but you know, a principle isn't necessarily something that's going to hurt or harm somebody. But it could just be your own belief of how you think you're going to die and how God's going to greet you. I may be wrong about it, but you know, he may acknowledge that I believed in that for however long I live and be like, yep, I'll do that for you. Who knows? Right. But that's not something you should be in trouble over. It's something that simple, but just something to prove really fast. There's 2 main principles that can prove the mainstream media that President Trump has control of. All right. 2 main things I've been showing people. One, you go to 47 U.S. Code section 606. It is actually titled War Powers of the President. That's your Telecommunications Act of 1996. All right. Telecommunications, right? Communications. FCC, your federal communications. All right. President can control radio, TV, internet broadcasts. All right. Listen to what that says, ladies and gentlemen. The president can control radio, TV, and internet broadcasts during a wartime situation. Well, there's one big obvious one there. The appeals court, President Trump posted this. The only way to find it was on his True Social. He posted twice now. The appeals court, so there's your judicial branch, ladies and gentlemen. Your appeals court upheld the ban they have on the Associated Press. Man, the big boy, the AP, Associated Press. Well, before we get to the punchline, listen to what it said. It said upheld. We uphold. We upheld. Upheld means it was already in place. It wasn't the ban being put on then. The ban was already established. All right. Did you read about when it was established? No, most of you didn't. Right. Well, that comes with a wartime authority command by a wartime president. It's a huge difference in a president who started foreign wars against the Constitution and against the War Powers Act versus a true wartime president, which comes with the laws and the orders. Well, emergency powers, every national emergency unlocks 120 statutory powers. One of those is regulating and restricting telecommunications. Well, if the appeals court is upholding a ban of the Associated Press, and then listen to what it says, ladies and gentlemen. It says they cannot access the White House or Mar-a-Lago. Well, that's specific to President Trump, that they cannot go to the premises of the White House or Mar-a-Lago, which means if you're reading anything from the Associated Press, they're not getting their evidence and facts straight from the source. They're making stuff up to still appease to their target audience. All right. So they got to be careful what they're typing and writing. Well, I've read some of their articles. They ain't being careful at all. They're still going with their same old deep state. So that means they're captured. All right. They're being watched. They've been banned from the president. Banned, restricted, banned, restricted. There's that terminology from what? Title 47. That's 47 U.S. Code Section 606. That's one thing. Another thing you've seen, Supreme Court upheld that President Trump can use the 1798 Aliens Act. All right. Well, I may have said it on this show. I can't remember, but I know I said it way back. It's on record. Someone would have to just go back and watch all my videos and find me saying it. But this happened long before what people thought took place on September the 10th with Charlie Kirk, quote unquote. All right. Well, 1798 Aliens Act. I specifically said, hey, don't forget. This is way back before that. I said, don't forget, there's another portion of that act. There's another portion that no one talks about. Now you're going to have, quote, historians. All right, you're going to have deep state liberals and government officials, retired and all those that, you know, all their Wheaties have been pooped in and all of their quote unquote residuals from their democracy, from their checks and balances are being stripped away. So they're going to retaliate. They're going to say stuff. They're going to say all kinds of things. That's against the law and that's fraudulent. That's it. 1798 is not just some cool number they came up with. It wasn't like it was, someone's address, you know, at Washington Avenue. No, it's 1798, the year. Is when this act went into place, ladies and gentlemen. The Supreme Court had to clarify that President Trump can use it. That's even sad in its own way, but for the sake of, it's on paper that he can. Well, after the events of September the 10th and Charlie Kirk, they started firing people from the NFL organizations. Woo! We know what the NFL's tied to. All right. And then also, they started firing people from MSNBC, ABC, and some of them. Now, the actual show The View is under FCC investigation. So all these people started saying things, started getting reprimanded and fired. You can't fire people, ladies and gentlemen, over a First Amendment. They could say the most atrocious thing about Charlie Kirk, the most atrocious. And you don't have to like them. You can absolutely 100% disagree with them, loathe them. I don't recommend hating because hate's not a good word, but you could absolutely dislike somebody for what they say, but you can't fire them over that unless one thing, wartime. But then it has to be a specific wartime order, specific wartime command by the president. And that is, again, like a broken record, this. there's another portion of the 1798 Aliens Act. It's the 1798 Aliens and Seditions Act. Now, the seditions part, to some of these historians, they're going to say, oh, well, it expired. Expiration didn't mean abolished. It wasn't abolished. It just expired because it's a wartime only act. You only use it in a wartime. You wouldn't want that being used just willy-nilly. You want it under a certain command, certain authority, right? The right way. And every Republican, conservative, patriot, MAGA, you should want it only inserted the correct way, only invoked the correct way. You wouldn't want it just used just because. No. But there's evidence of invasion. There's evidence of rebellion in this nation that led to this wartime command, that led to this wartime operation, strategic special operation. So the seditions portion, way back in 1800, and you and I both know what was going on during that time period. As here they were. You still had the British. They were still festering over there, and they were still stewing. They didn't like what had taken place, and that was, it was 12 years before they revolted. So that was showing you they were planning a revolt. They weren't going away. All right. So 1800, they had this in place. And our founding fathers were trying to quell everything back then. They were trying to say, hey, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. Everybody, you should want to buy into this. This is not going to hurt anybody. This is for the bigger picture. No matter how you believe. That's why they had a separation. They had all these things. They didn't put church with government. They didn't do this with this. That's 1800. People could be punished. American citizens could be punished for fraudulently or scandalously writing against the government. Woo! That's the portion you're seeing in votes right now. So those are just two things that shows you right out the gate that yes, President Trump most certainly is a unique, different position. It is a wartime commander. He's not a regular president. None of this is normal. None of this is regular. And it's never going to happen again either, because it is the clean out, Great Awakening, however you want to look at it. It is a massive clean out. It's a resetting of our declaration as prescribed and described in it. I tell people all the time, the declaration is a prescription and a description. It's a prescription, meaning if we have to use it in the future, here's our foundation. And it's a description showing this is how you use it if we have to use it. All right. And everybody's witnessed a true, like the sentence of the declaration where it says, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations becomes destructive, it is their right to throw off such government and reestablish that back on our foundation. That's what we've done. And that's what we're doing. And so naturally, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear rhetoric. Yeah, you're going to hear retaliations by the deep state and low-level people who are retired now, and they had some big fancy title, and it looks good on paper. But look what they're fighting for. Look at their verbiage. Listen to what they're fighting for. They're fighting for what they had. They're not fighting for the future. None of their rhetoric fights for the future. None of their rhetoric fights for your future, for your children, for your grandchildren, for everything. It's all about what they're losing, right? And they're losing what they established for themselves, not for you.
Well, and that's the key. And that leads into what I wanted to ask you about in regard to what's going on right now. So these idiots shut the government down, which is all part of the plan, but they shut the government down. You have all these Doge cuts that were found and could be made. When or why haven't we seen too many of them enacted?
When and why have we seen too many of them enacted? Meaning like the cuts?
Why haven't we seen a whole bunch of the cuts, especially when it was brought up, if quote unquote they shut down the government, we have this ability to do that. Why haven't they cut a bunch of those programs, not only to A, cut government spending, but to B, really cripple the D-rats?
Well, one, the whole thing again, it's hard to answer that from this angle because the whole thing is an operation, right? So when you go back to when did this operation start on paper or visually, however you want to look at it, started way back January the 20th, 2017, as far as the visual effects of the laws, the orders. And then, I know that's hard for people to comprehend, but every bit of what people have seen with your eyes from January the 2017 to present day, it's all been theater, right? And you have President Trump who hammered all along the way. This is for the target audience, though. See that all the hammering comes for the target audience that has to see it, because the target audience is not sitting in my seat, your seat, anybody. So the target audience has to see it play that way until they either get inquisitive enough to question the first lie, and then that, because when you question one, you got to question them all. Because once they uncover one thing and it wasn't what they've been taught or learned or thought, then they're going to start rabbit holing, which they should, but that's what's going to happen. So most people don't want to question it, because then they go, whoa, I can't believe I'm believing this conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy theory. Military laws, military orders, military strategies, military tactics, military customs, military regulations are not conspiracies, ladies and gentlemen. They're not. All right. So, but once people do that, they're going to have to see the whole thing's been theater. So like President Trump hammering Jack Smith, who was quote unquote appointed by Merrick Garland, like to the average people. Well, President Trump put in there, it was a fraudulent position. All right. Well, President Trump has a response. So let's just do the math here. Jack Smith came after President Trump. I think it was June or July 8th, way back in 2023. That's when he filed charges on the documents now. So this is how you learn these things, ladies and gentlemen, like the documents, presidential records. All right. There's a thing called a Presidential Records Act of 1978. Guess what? I'm going to make some of y'all feel old. That's older than me. So there you go. There is a law that's been in place longer than me that says the president and the vice president can hold certain documents, certain records. All right. So the average verbiage over here with the deep state, the liberals, and the average crowd goes to, oh, President Trump was holding records he wasn't supposed to be having. Well, President Trump told you over and over again last year, he said it real subtle, and it was out of nowhere. Now, people did see it on the news with Miami, but for the sake of, people forget about that. But everybody saw that, and then just subtly after it, he said, oh, and by the way, did you see I won my documents case? It wasn't some big to-do all over the news that, oh, President Trump wins this document. No, he just subtly said it in a conversation at a rally. He said, oh, and by the way, did you see I won my documents case? And here's how he said it. And I'm paraphrasing if there's a paraphrase, but I'm going to say this close to accurate is what he said. He specifically said, I have the Presidential Records Act. He doesn't. And he wasn't talking about Jack. He's talking about Joe Biden. All right. So in 2023 and 2024, the average target audience would have thought that Joe Biden was sitting president. If you're a sitting president, ladies and gentlemen, you're already covered, period. Because you're commander-in-chief, you're the chief executive officer of the executive branch. And only after you leave that position can you be investigated for certain things. Because as a sitting president, you would have that command and authority, and it specifically says this in our law. So if you look at listen to the verbiage that President Trump said, and apply the timeline of what people thought. People would have thought that Joe Biden was a sitting president in 2024. And President Trump's telling you, I have the Presidential Records Act. He doesn't. He didn't say didn't. He wasn't talking about Joe Biden back here as a vice president with Obama. That is very key right there. Now go back to President Trump not long ago posting about Jack Smith being fraudulent. None of these people were under an oath because they didn't have to take an oath. The whole thing's a military operation, the whole setup. So there's no real Congress right now. That's all the distraction pieces. It looks real to the target audience because it's supposed to, because while they're keeping people distracted here, they're doing what they need to be over here, cleaning out everything they've been cleaning out. So Israel, the Middle East, NATO, trafficking, drug trafficking, child trafficking, sex trafficking, everything's been cleaned out everywhere. And we're not talking about no bull crap like Obama and Bush and all them with drug trafficking, where they would do a drug bust, right? And then they would circle it back to Colombia, right? No, we're talking about destruction of all. I mean, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars and millions of pounds of cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, everything. They're destroying them. All right. How do you destroy them? Well, if everybody remembers, just not long ago, there was a article that popped out about Area 51 was on fire. Nah, way out in the middle of nowhere where there's no one hardly there. That fire was a destruction. All right. So those are little things they keep showing you, right? They're destroying all this stuff. And no, they ain't got Snoop Dogg and Willie sitting around getting a secondhand high as they burn this stuff up. All right. So there's none of that going on either. All right. So when you look at that bigger picture of the Jack Smith, President Trump saying fraudulent, go back and look at the ABC article whenever Jack Smith, quote unquote, dropped his case against President Trump, December the 30th, 2024 is the article, but he dropped it in November. No articles in November about it. There wasn't any articles. It was over in December, almost to January this year. All right. Go look at the ABC article on that. And then you got to go back, and there's another thing you can look at that says specifically about President Trump being a sitting president. That is Supreme Court docket 23, letter A, 745. Go to supremecourt.gov. This is how we talk about, Mark was saying it earlier. This is how you go to Google on your phone. Type in Google. Just type in Supreme Court docket search, enter, or your computer. Pull up the Supreme Court docket page. All you got to do is type in 23, the letter A, all cap, A, 745. Enter. Boom. You'll see President Trump's response. This was February. I think it was February last year. Could have been another month, but go back. It's already been in the books. And it asked a specific question in there, and it asked the question about a sitting president. Let's do that math. So Jack brought on these charges in mid 2023. He dropped it in November 2024. 2023 and 2024, most people thought President Trump was a what? A former president. Why would the term sitting president be necessary? All right, because when he's a sitting president, he can most certainly hold those documents, right? Because he's acting with those documents. Those documents are active, right? Those are what happened with his administration. So the question is, can President Trump be holding these as a sitting president? So they're telling you right there that what President Trump just said with the generals and admirals the other day. He said, I'm 45, 46, and 47. I don't really want the results of 46, but I'll take it, right? Because it's an operation. All right. So these Jack Smith. So all this shutdown, none of this. That's why I can't ever answer it with a straight face. Is because I'm like, well, none of it. It's it's like certain people who thought a certain court case out there was going to overturn the 2020 election. I kept telling people, no, it's not. The whole thing's an operation. The whole thing, right? The whole thing was not about the 2020 election. The whole thing is about all elections. The whole thing is about the deep state. And by the way, I ain't heard anybody else talking about it yet, but since we're talking about this, Dominion, didn't Dominion just get bought by a U.S. company, right? I'm pretty sure they're Republican. You don't think that was strategic? Like all this stuff, like, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like it's so hard to answer it from another angle because this stuff, I'm telling you, like the smiles and then I don't know. Anyway. So all those little entities prove that what you're watching right now is strategic from the standpoint of where we are in October in the fiscal year ending. Our military's being taken care of, ladies and gentlemen, because the military is in an occupation and an operation. So they don't. The pay is already going to be there no matter what, right? So getting hung up on the specific little hiccup of what you think is real time is what we're trying to break you of, because none of it's real time from that angle. It's all choreographed, pre-planned this way. All right. The fiscal calendar ends anyway, September the 30th, right? So a lot of people don't know those little intricacies. A lot of people don't even know our original inauguration date was March the 4th, not January the 20th. So it could be, I don't know, I'm not a commander, but it could be that they're resetting that. We may have a reset again of where our fiscal year ends and begins for better accounting purposes. Who knows? I mean, it could be that because our banks have changed. The central bank is done away with, right? That's what the deep state operated with. We brought back the gold standard. Everything's going more digital. All right. I know people are afraid of artificial intelligence, but you can't be, because the enemy's going to use it no matter what. So if the enemy's going to use it, we need to be in control of that, over the target always. And then if we're always up here, the enemy's always right here. So it's nothing to be afraid of if people are still applying the principles of our laws and our orders, of our origin and our foundation and our history. As we move forward, technology is not to be feared in another kind of manner, as long as we're doing the right thing with it. I can't really, it's just so hard to answer that from a target audience. But at the same time, the Doge and everything has done what it's supposed to do. And here's one other little tag on, if I may, just really quick, is this: to show people it's operational. Doge. All right. For the people that thought Joe Biden was real, in the American Rescue Family Plan Act of 2021, under quote unquote Joe, why would he fund Doge? He's funded Doge in that. Now, I know he wasn't real, and I use he in present tense for the target audience sake, but that's part of the operation. Because if President Trump's a dictator, if he's a fascist, if he's a threat to the Constitution and all these things they charged of him, then why would they fund Doge, spelled out clear as a bell, over in the American Rescue Family Plan Act of 2021? Right? So see that, look, but that's why you got to read those. As you know, boy, those acts, they could be 700, 800 pages long, line. I mean, you got to read every line. And I mean, and so the time you get to page 38, which will be 700 lines in it, whatever it is, you're going to be like, right? But little things like that prove that Joe was a puppet government, civil affairs, World War II tactic, and it's all unconventional warfare and irregular warfare. That's why I tell people, look, you may not be military minded, and that's okay, but if you really want to know, just deep dive those special operations. Go read the joint publications. Go read the Unconventional Warfare 2016 Pocket Guide by Special Operations. I mean, read everything you can on special operations and irregular warfare, and also eliminate the feeling of being wrong about something. Just don't worry about that right now. Let your mind go, get a foundation, but then let your mind be able to go, well, what if they are doing this, and this, and that? I'm not beating anybody up for thinking differently, right? But you still have to have a foundation. But it's all strategic, special operations, and you got to go read those first. And until then, that's how you get in the mindset of the commanders, and especially your top commander, your supreme commander.
Now, when you get back to theater, and when, I think most of the people understand it's theater, it's a movie, it's already been played out. It's just being played out for the public now. And you brought up what's going on, or what went on 2 years ago in Israel. And now you've got all this hoopla that there's going to be peace there, and, everybody's going to be hugging and kissing, and the hostages are coming home, et cetera, et cetera. How much, and I looked at it almost funnier than than last July's attempt on the president's life. That was comical to watch. But watching these guys who don't have an Air Force, don't have a Navy, and they're skydiving into the most secure country in the world, it was just a farce. Now, I'm not saying that people didn't die and people weren't hurt, et cetera, et cetera. But how much of that operation was the four main leaders in charge, and how much of it actually involved at all the government of Israel or the Mossad?
Well, that's where you go back and you just look at, it's hard to address this without kind of looking and commenting towards the people of your mainstream audience, like your Republicans, conservatives, because we see it. I do read it. It's kind of like, when coaches, they try to keep their players from seeing external factors, but they do, right? Oh, we're going to beat your rear end, or you're not that good. And not, so you use that as like tactic strategy too, right? From that angle. But same thing with people. I've heard all kinds of things. Oh, President Trump is Netanyahu's puppet and all this other stuff. And this is setting up for this and it's setting up for that. And then it goes back to, again, well, what are you going to do about it? This ain't going to do nothing, right? And I'm not a preacher or a pastor or evangelist, but I can tell you one thing. I'm pretty sure that when the Bible says that you've fought the good fight and you've kept the faith and you fought a good fight, that wasn't being a Karen in the comment box on Facebook. That ain't what that's talking about, right? So, I mean, the true fight, the real fighting. Now, I take the viewpoint of my grandfather, who was the Native American, where he believed in war when it was necessary, but it was an absolute last case scenario. If we have to, we're going to kick your butt. But it goes back to, I got a buddy in Texas who's a Marine Corps veteran, and he says this all the time. You prepare for war, pray for peace, all right? Or pray for peace, prepare for war. So if you always walk around, that's why they change it back to Department of War. It don't mean we're going to go to war. It just means that we're going to be prepared for it always. If we have to use it, we're going to kick your butt. But hopefully we won't have to do that. But if we're strong on the top always, you'll want to abide by diplomacy the right way, because you'll know that we will use this. And if we have to use it, we're going to kick your butt. Big difference in saying, we're the Department of Defense and we're going to sit back here and then, we got to attack and, let's go get them. Huge difference. So it's a mentality. It's a mindset. It's also the art of war, right? And you keep that always at the forefront. And then Roosevelt, you speak softly, carry a big stick. And as long as you're doing that and you show people, I will use this stick if we have to, then they're going to be what? Oof, we don't want to mess with that because we know what their capabilities are, right? So way back, even in the 80s, I mean, we've always had in Vietnam, we've had like tonal rats, what they call tonal rats. We've had subterranean warfare, but it was never made a strategic plan. It was never put into the military as a strategic plan. And then an all-out blueprint of studying it, preparing with it, practicing with it, and using it when we need to. All right, so this stems way back to JFK. Who would ever guess, right? Now, so JFK, well, I'll spin it this way. So on October the 7th, the date of 2023, that everybody thought that this war in Israel kicked off, October the 7th, the anniversary of Yom Kippur, all these things in that same time period, right? October the 7th, 2023, Special Operations Command. I mean, I keep my hat right here close by. It's kind of in the distance back here, my bag back here. But Special Operations Command, they put out a new publication, and it's titled Renaissance. The only person who's used the term Renaissance recently for the world to see. And in the back of this, and it's not a long read at all, ladies and gentlemen. Go look it up. October the 7th, 2023, comma, on Google, comma, Special Operations Command, comma, Renaissance. Enter. .mil site, Special Operations. Very bottom. They put JFK's letter in there from April the 11th, 1962. And in that letter, he talks about guerrilla warfare. And see, what I've tried to tell people is guerrilla warfare can be used for good, and it can be used on the bad side. It's the same thing with artificial intelligence. But if you know the enemy's going to use it, then you want to use it too, but you want to be the master of it. And that way, when you're the master of it, it's kind of like MMA. MMA is real, like more mind. Like at any given time period, someone can beat someone because it's grappling, and it's all depends on strategy, right? And what the other person's good at and what the other person's weak at. And, that's why a lot of those MMA guys, that they don't focus so much on losing, because they know that it's just a strategy, right? And one can out strategize you than the other. It's not like poker where the cards come as they come, and you can't really read the cards that way because you don't know what's going to come, right? So it's a little different. So when you look at that aspect of it, all right, that warfare, that is what JFK was talking about. Then President Trump is the first president to implement a blueprint and strategic blueprint and strategy for subterranean warfare. All right. And we've done it really quick. Now, we had guys I'm on with, like Lieutenant Colonel Bosey and Colonel Sellers, who was the former deputy commander of Delta Force. I mean, elite guys, ladies and gentlemen, elite. All right. We have people who have been in those facets, in those fields, that can contribute to where our success of soldiers that are still doing in operations, doing those, are much more successful and quicker at it because of those minds and the men who are leading those teams and women. There's some women involved in this. I know some of them, all right, on special operations. So that it makes it a lot more strategic, but also a lot more lethal, quicker. President Trump's the first to do that. Now, all these people out there talk about, he's been compromised on. The NDAAs, the National Defense Authorizations Act, there's your defense budgets right there. All right. Even the one from December the 20th, 2019, that's in the Title 50, Chapter 33, the War Powers Act, that President Trump is most certainly operating under and with, which makes his whole everything lawful via bipartisan Congress. All right. Even though they were in an operation, it still doesn't matter. That's on paper. Those NDAAs already talked about Israel. They already talked about Iran. They already talked about every aspect, the Iron Dome, what President Trump calls the Golden Dome, but the Iron Dome, all these things were way back here, already talked about. So like the people reacting right now, saying all those things, you really look foolish, and I'll use that lightheartedly. You look foolish because all this stuff's way back here. It's already been back here. It's already been funded way back here, and it's moving its way forward. And like the Iran thing, they were one of the nations that didn't capitulate to President Trump. It was visual. When you knew what the capitulations were, they didn't capitulate. Venezuela didn't capitulate. Those are part of the deep state that were hanging on to those executive orders that the deep state established. Iran is an executive order from way back in 1979, right? Jimmy Carter, Venezuela, Obama, right? So there's two nations that didn't capitulate, and they got what was coming to them, and they're taking it, right? And being decimated. President Trump used the term decimation. That means obliteration. All right. But it's already been done. But like the Israel thing. Now, I'm not a preacher. Again, I always specify that. So I tell people that don't be in my inbox acting like, you're the specialist. Right. I'm specialist with military, but whole different thing, whole different level. But things like this, the Israel of what you're seeing today, it's not the Israel of the Bible times. All right. It's not. And here's how you just apply a simple principle of that. All right. When you take the Arab nations around that little sliver over there, there is no way that group of people in that little tiny sliver would fend off those Arab nations if they really wanted to overtake Israel. There's no way. There's no way. Manpower and also technology. There's no way they could wipe out, decimate if they absolutely wanted to. All right, I mean, that is just basic logic, just straight up logic. All right, so many people are getting into what you think you've been taught in the church, right? What you think you know of Israel. All right, I can't tell you you're right or wrong because that's not my place. But I'm just telling you on a military standpoint, there is no way whatsoever, if that were the case, that they couldn't go in there and wipe them out. So this is all to do with money and also power and things that have been going on for years, right? And same thing with NATO. Same principles with NATO. There's a principle again, same thing. We funded 98% of NATO. 98%. We did that. The United States of America. We funded 98% of all operations over there. And all the deep state just took it because they were building residuals in another way for themselves. That's when President Trump, when he says we have it all, we cut them off, this is the stuff he's talking about. The money laundering in Ukraine. I mean, and we can go to all different kind of places. We can just keep going throughout history. All right. Estonia, Lithuania, we can break them all down if we just wanted to. So all these things, the ones that are popular to people. Now go back to 2018. Now the articles read that they were funded in 2017. That would be your NDAA. But the articles started reading, matter of fact, as early as June 24, 2018, military.com, you can look it up to this day, that the Army was spending $572 million training 26 of 31 combat brigades. That's pretty much, I mean, that's over 75%. All right. 26 of 31 for our next wars. And this is specific, ladies and gentlemen, you got to listen. It says specifically, our next wars will be in mega cities, not inside them, but beneath them. Subways, tunnels, subterranean warfare. Now, the number is key, 572 million. President Trump said to NATO, we're not paying anymore. Somebody else will. It won't be us. Some of y'all, all of you, you're going to step up. It ain't going to be us. We're not fighting your bullcrap wars anymore. We're not doing this. Somebody else will. He said that to Mexico. We're not paying for it. Someone else will. All right. Well, we got 28,000 Mexican troops that helped build the border wall. 28,000. Guess who funded those paychecks? Mexico did. All right. We built the wall because we wanted the wall to be built the way we wanted it to be built with our material. But 28,000 of their troops helped with it. Who paid that bill? Who floated that bill? Mexicano president did that. All right. Not the United States of America. So all these things that people saw. June 24, 2018, $572 million. There's your first account of it. June 24, 2018. That's one article. All right, now move to 2019. The war colleges, our war colleges, and we have war colleges that officers go to and things of that nature. And we also have our academies. All right, there's a publication, Shaping the Deep Fight, the Operational Conflict of Subterranean Warfare. Female, ladies and gentlemen, females were yet. It was a female, the most popular one I use. All right. And it specifically shows a chapter in there. And it says Hamas, and it says Gaza, Egypt, cross-border operations. May 2019 outlines Hamas, Gaza, Egypt, cross-border operations. And then it says what down in there? $572 million. August 2019. So this was May. August 2019. Department, so your Defense Intelligence Agency, all right, that Flynn used to be over way back when, that put out a publication for Iran. And it talks about the underground bunkers in Iran, and it also mentions North Korea, thousands of miles of underground facilities. All right. It even talks about the shadow government in there. Huh, what a coincidence that is. Also in August 2019, our military puts out a publication about Hamas. What are the odds of that? Then August 2019, Johnson & Johnson, no relation. All right. Johnson & Johnson, state of Oklahoma, loses a court case in a battle about opioids. Who put in executive orders for opioids? That would be President Donald John Trump. Way back in 2017, combating opioids. Who was the one who combated Big Farm? President Donald John Trump. All right. All President Trump. What are the odds all this ties in? So Johnson & Johnson, state of Oklahoma, Johnson & Johnson loses a case, and they're forced to pay a fine over this opioids battle. Guess how much it was? $572 million. Now, what are the odds of that? All these things take place. And then what you're seeing, October the 7th, 2023, within 2 or 3 weeks, guess what New York Times and all these captured by Title 47 mainstream publications put out? The war has now gone where? To the tunnels. That's subterranean warfare, ladies and gentlemen. The whole thing is strategically planned. The whole thing is wiping out their money chains, their money supplies of drug trafficking, sex trafficking, human trafficking, and child trafficking. And drug trafficking funds a lot of those. And you can have, there's a lot of people who are speaking up right now. There's a lot of people that I've spoken to that their families were former like drug lords, and they can tell you how these rings operate and function, and they're part of the good part of society and humanity that's cleaning this out. All right, but again, that's what President Trump is the face of. He's not the one doing that. He's not out there like that. Like, he signed up to be the face, the name, the brand, the image. When they needed him to get up and speak and say something, he said, I'll do it. I'm willing to take that. Yes, I believe in this, etc. That's it. But it's really the military back here doing all those things. And this whole thing's been strategically planned. And as we know, I don't use Q a lot because, you know, what people tend to do in the target audience, when they hear that, then a guy like me who is operational, who is veteran status, right, they automatically write it off because they think it's a conspiracy, and they cannot seem to understand that, look, Q is a clearance. It is for the military. It's a Department of Energy clearance. I know someone with Q clearance personally. All right. And so people can't separate that. So what I do is I try to talk laws and orders first, and then I'll go, hey, once you know all this is straight up military, it is real. This is what if you wanted to join, if you were young enough to join, this is what you serving on it right here. And when you get in there, you're going to realize, oh, your opinion and all that, you got, especially if you're on the enlisted side, you're going to be just like that until you're told to open that mouth. All right. And then also going to the bathroom. You ain't going to pee when you want to, and you ain't going to do the other when you want to. You have to ask. No matter how old you are, if you're under a certain rank, your butt is going to have to ask to use the bathroom. All right. Just want to say that. Not trying to be all crude here, but you got to put that in there. All right. So all that. Anyway.
Well, see, but this is why I said what I said at the beginning of the show before I brought you on. And this is what a lot of people don't understand, because they do tend to rely on Q drops and their deltas and this and that and the other, which Q drops are Q drops, and the deltas can fall on certain dates. But basically, it's all hypothesis. It's all editorialism. You're giving your opinion of what you think is going on.
Well, and Q has been proven with President Trump. I mean, he holds the Q up in his hand. That's not a mistake. The man who revolutionized using social media, because that's where most of the target audience is, right? So it is real. But I want people to know, like, it's real, but it's a clearance, and it was made for people who are military first, right? Now, you may find out you can read it and comprehend it. That's okay. But what ends up happening is people use that, then because they go, oh, I can think like it. They start week, 2 weeks, a month, a year goes by. All of a sudden, they feel like they are that. And I do step on some toes. I'm like, no, you're not an anon, right? The anons were already established. They're anon on purpose. They're an anon that mean anonymous. You don't know about them, right? So they were already established. All this verbiage was already established. It's shorthand, and military understands it, and it should be military personnel breaking it down. But at the same time, because it is far-fetched to someone, because it's on a regular website, right, for the world to see, then someone knows, well, you can go to GoDaddy and buy you something. Yes, you can. True. All right. But it is accurate. But the laws and orders are closer to the president than anything. And if you just had those, that's all you would need to know. But then the Q, and in saving, Israel for last is in the Q. It does say that. But see, people won't know how to apply it if they don't know what any of that means as well. So that's why typical people go, that's a conspiracy theorist. And it's like, nah, it's just like, But we know that the old school term conspiracy theorist means you're accurate and you know what you're talking about. But at the same time, I try to make people see that, like, look, I hold all that off initially until hey, look, here's what you can tangibly put your hands on via .gov.mil sites, and here's how it all goes together in a strategic, chronological, choreographed order blueprint. But the Q is real, and President Trump don't make mistakes when he does that, ladies and gentlemen. It's no mistake at all. But I do it for the sake of integrity, because I know people with that clearance, and I know people with all kinds of other clearances. And so for the integrity of that, it goes back to, like, President Trump getting the credit for the establishment. And the military wanted anybody who says you put your name and face on that, you definitely deserve to get credit for it looking that way to the target audience. And then there's people that I know who are still operational right now on high levels way back here, right? You're never going to know them because most of them want to keep doing what they're doing, and what they're doing still is going to require them being masked, right? And then clearance, and you not knowing them until they want you to know who they are. And some of them just don't care about this right here either. Some of them love so much because they're in this opportunity that not many get, right? On the operational inside of the military, right? Not the external doing what I'm doing, still with an opportunity that was provided to me with DOD, certain things. But other than that, they're not going, you're never going to know them. So I do it for them too. And that's the ones that paid me a visit the other day and all the other things. And, moving up the ladder myself. And I tell people there's certain things I don't say because I'm trying to show that I can still have that loyalty, but also that oath, the loyalty to that oath, where I can, hopefully, if got presented an opportunity to step up, I can take it, and they'll know that I'm loyal, trustworthy, and can hold information without telling. That's why I don't tell everything that President Trump and I have ever had a conversation with. Now, I'm not anywhere close to his buddy, his inside team, like real intricate inside. I've been blessed to have the opportunities to be around him and have certain strategic conversations that are specific to he and I, but nothing where it's like, we shoot the breeze this way and nothing like that. So that's why I keep things to myself, because I'm like, you know what? He may be testing me on something he told me. And that's how that stuff works, right? They know, they see, and they have people who know and see if you've repeated certain things. And even in private conversation, it don't even just have to be on public. So, it's part of that role and duty on this side of things. But yeah, the Q, I just always hold that off, but it is real. And if you can comprehend it and read it, great. But that is that divide, what we're talking about with influencers. An influencer who is giving you something that still comes back to them always, versus, I don't like the word influencer, but if you're an influencer who is showing people how to empower yourself with the laws and the orders, and you still have to come back to that influencer to make sure you're hearing it, studying it, reading it correctly, okay. But when it's someone who's just sitting there and ruffling your feathers, if you're bitter, angry, sad, and you still walk away bitter, angry, sad, and not confident about something, then that's not one of God either. And I'll throw one of my buddies under the bus in a good way, but Major Jim O'Connor's, who was Army West Point graduate, but also a major in the Army as well. And then he's now a bishop. It's like he says, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not happy, smiling, comfortable, peaceful, any of those things, if something makes you mad, angry, bitter, frustrated, then it's not of God, because the Bible says that I didn't give you the spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. Right. And that's what empowerment does, is gives you clarity. It helps you divorce your emotions and your feelings, and it gives you clarity on something you can sink your teeth into, which is technically, theoretically, your mind, and give you peace and comfort that, hey, if you love this man, then here's why you love him, and here's why you should want to love him. But it's also not just loving him, it's loving all the men and women back here on world level, not just U.S., world level, who all have the same heart, same mind, same focus, same goal. And it's kind of, I love that quote, but that Bear Bryant made years ago. I know I always got to pull someone Bama into something. All right, got the old school A here, but Bear Bryant told his team, though, at Texas A&M, he said, when we get all 11 men on the field with one heartbeat, that's when we got a team, right? And anybody who knows the true X's and O's of football knows that to get all those men to operate at the same time on the same count when the ball snaps, and to do what every man's supposed to do in his position, then when you have that one heartbeat, that means you're all thinking alike and you're all operating as a unit together. And that's what we're supposed to be doing as Americans. That's why I say, why are we looking for the bad in people? Why are we looking for negativity in people? How did we get to America where everybody's looking for the bad daily and negative, right? That was all by design by the deep state. And they're winning. As long as you keep being bad and negative, or looking for the bad and negative, and being angry, bitter, they're winning. All right. But they're not existing anymore That's just a facade of them existing. Like they're wiped out, they're cleaned out. But you can be clear here and already on board with this right here if you'll divorce your emotions, divorce your feelings, and go, you know what? What's that old quote says that when you do things over and over again, you expect different results, but you're doing the same things over and over. It's called insanity.
That's
right?
the definition of insanity.
Definition of it, right? So change up. What's it gonna hurt you? What would it hurt? It's not. You're gonna love this man even more. What he sacrificed, his family sacrificed. It ain't just him. His family had to sign on with this. Everybody had to sign on. His family, and then you're gonna love the military even more for what's taking place.
I'll tell you, Bishop Jim's great people, and he'll be back on here in a few weeks. But absolutely wonderful people, wonderful. So now, with all the movement that's going on globally, but especially here in the U.S., with Antifa and all the other subgroups and BLM, all the troublemakers out there, and the fact that the president is moving military into all the major cities in preparation, besides the preparation that we know has already gone into this, and what you were just talking about with the subterranean warfare. How do you think that is going to turn out, and is it going to be the same old in the sense that they're going to cause their trouble and the guys are just going to push back and maybe, let off some pepper spray and some tear gas, or are they finally going to show them we as a country are not going to tolerate this anymore and perhaps take some of them down?
Well, most of those have already been infiltrated by the good guys. I mean, that's kind of like, when I was showing people all the photos of the National Guard and all the different entities operating the last few years. Like this, we don't train foreign entities in their helicopters on our bases. And these weren't even bases. I mean, I have photographs of, some of the most far-fetched countries in bum-tuck North Carolina and New York, on municipal, county, and regional airports. If you've ever been to a municipal or county airport, ladies and gentlemen, in the middle of nowhere, I've been to a bunch of them. They're just one little strip. They don't even have a terminal, some of them. We wouldn't have foreign entities on our basis, even a reserve or National Guard base, without there being some operation going on. Now we have individuals from other nations that have visited our bases, yes, and we have aircraft that have come in and out of our bases before at a different capacity. But when there's absolutely a blueprint in place of showing that, hey, this is a military occupation, this is what it consists of, this is what they're doing, then you can put those pieces together. So like some people are being exposed right now that people thought that were, on paper, or maybe rather social media, people thought were, that person, they claim loyalty to President Trump. It's like, nah. If they were President Trump's insider, they'd already be an insider. All right. And so many people, they influenced President Trump. No, they didn't do that. President Trump is in control of this. This is all a takedown to certain people who say that. So I say that to say there's a recent article of someone saying, and I'm not going to give their name because I don't give them credit, but they're talking about Qatar, all right, Qatar, however you want to pronounce it, it's perfect. But so you have Qatar over there, right? And there's a recent thing, they're going to establish a base in Idaho. And no, they're not. Like, see, that's someone who went and spun all this out there, or maybe someone looking for publicity and they spun that, and now it's all floated all over the internet. All right. And then Hegseth says, no, it's an established military base already, and we're going to establish some training with an agreement with Qatar, right? Well, if you have any whatever with that, then you're not following President Trump, because then you got to go, who's the Secretary of Defense? Hegseth. Who's his boss? President Trump, right? Wartime president. So when you know that, then you got to believe that. And if you are someone who posted Trump was right about everything, he can't be right about everything one day and then, oh, what are you doing, President Trump? No, because the whole thing is not over. There's your visual, right? So I said all that to say about all these aircraft that I filmed, and I can tell you how much your iPhone can hold. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about the new 17, but mine's an old school 11. That's how old mine is. That's why I got a cassette tape as my as my cover. That's it, because I don't like change like that. I can deal with certain change, but I like when I got a phone and it's working. I don't want to go shuffle everything over and learn new buttons and all that. Right? I'm old school like that. But the 11, I've got 34,000 photos in the gallery alone. All right. That's how many your iPhone will hold till it starts saying full. You got to go through and delete some. Most all those are aircraft. All right. That's how many aircraft that I have of foreign entities and our National Guard operating in places that they would not typically operate, which shows, I kept saying back then, I had a dentist at the time who was a reserve. There you go. Always gone. Always gone. Why? Because of what's taking place right now. But the one time he'd be in, we were sitting there talking, and the hygienist overheard us talking, and she said, what are y'all talking about? And we were like, you don't want to know, do you? She was like, yeah, I do. So we were like, I was making a joke, and I said, well, because she overheard us talking about the military operating in cities. And she did. She was inquisitive. She wanted to know. So I said, well, she said, well, what does that really mean? I said, well, they're just getting ready for an operation that's coming. This was way back now. This is like 2023. She said, and I said that for an operation that's coming, they're getting all their grid points where they can clearance a helicopter coming down, making sure the blades can fit down in here. They get all their drop points, their drop zones, and they're gridding that. That way, when it's go time, they'll go right to that spot. And let me tell you what. There was one time I was on a Lakota, and this pilot, now, we were in the city, and this pilot put this Lakota on a launch, on a pad, on a landing pad in the middle of all these buildings. Now, he was like a chief warrant. All right. And the lieutenant was sitting there next to him. And I could hear that lieutenant, rookie, right? Sir. That joker, we come in there like this, and he stuck it just that fast on a landing pad with all these buildings around, right? And the landing pad was elevated on the top of a building, right? And all these other buildings that were higher, which means that blade had to have that clear. He came in there just like this. We were weaving through these buildings, and then he pops it up, and I do it like this, just like that, stuck it. And I'm talking about that fast. We came in hot. Now I can't do it on the screen, but we came in hot, and he just that quick. That is how good these warrant officers are. These pilots of these helicopters of the National Guard, the reserves, all of them, active duty, doesn't matter. That is what they were practicing. That's what they were gridding. And when I said that, he goes, we got them, baby. We're ready. So see, what everybody's watching now are the operations of that practice back there, that training, right? And that's why I always love to bring up the trolls and the haters in a good way, because way back in 2022 and 2023, there were a couple National Guard who would be in my comment boxes. Oh, if you'd have spent more years in the military, you'd know this is just training. Bravo. Yeah, you know what? You were so busy about being right about something. They didn't see the bigger picture. They weren't reading the laws and orders, but yeah, they were training all right for this moment. So yeah, all this stuff is going to be so quick and fast. What they actually do and what they, even stuff like the pepper spray, which is hilarious to us veterans. That's that old FAFO saying that we always say. But that's still strategic, even with the mainstream media doing that as well. But what's actually taking place on the ground, there's no time at all that when military is involved in civil operations like this, is it going to be some lighthearted pat you on the shoulder? It's like President Trump said, you spit in our face, we're going to kick your butt. And kicking butt means you're going to be taken down and you're going to be treated accordingly as, you know, a foreign entity, which is what they're acting like. And that's why Abraham Lincoln and the Congress and everything of 1862, they added foreign and domestic for this very instance. Like, every one of these people can know what you and I know. Every one of these people can act like you and I. You can be civilized or you can be a moron. You get the choice, right? And if you want to be a moron, then you're going to get treated like a moron, right? And it's like President Trump with these military zones down in Texas and New Mexico and Arizona. There are stipulations that say, all right, you step foot in here, you better make sure what you're stepping in here for, because if you look guilty, but you ain't guilty, you're still going to be treated that way until you prove your what? Your innocence. So it's like it's like when you're driving in traffic jam and people, everybody, they just will put on brakes. Everybody trying to get home, they'll absolutely stop just to see what's going on. And same thing, right? And then that sometimes leads to another fender bender because people are so nosy on that. So it's the same thing. So all these people in these cities, Antifa, the low level still that's out on the streets, if they stick their nose out there, then it might just get clipped. So that's what we, again, FAFO. You want to come on down here? Stupid games get stupid prizes. But I think by all the other things that they're seeing on TV, these people that when they go to their humble abodes, if they have them, they're going to see a lot of this by example. It's the same thing. When you see it, they will really go, I don't really want a part of that because they're going to do this. But do I believe there will be some? Sure, because there are people out there cocky, bold, and they think that it won't happen. Well, that's actually what we want. Come on down, and then we can get you out, because it's kind of like the other kind of mindsets. You see all these individual teams out there that run these basically sting operations on these predators. Well, it's the same thing. If they were, some people think that's entrapment, and I'm like, well, they're already thinking like that though. So, like if they were going to do this, I watched a video the other day of a team that, they got this priest, 60 something years old, who was meeting a 14-year-old at like a Target, and the way, obviously the way they find out is because, well, here's the messages and here he is texting and there he is right there. I mean, and then it showed the arrest. It showed the booking of that person. So there are things. So there's incidences like that. So yeah, some of this will be real because we still have some of those rats running around on the streets. But then I think it quickly flips once they get through all the cities and clean that out. Then it quickly goes back to the rescuing of the homeless, which President Trump has made an emphasis as well. Our city streets will be cleaned up. The graffiti, all this stuff's going to be cleaned up. He's talking about the tearing down of the buildings. This was way back in his speeches at Waco, way back in 2023. So we're going to tear down the ugly buildings. We're going to build those back up. We're going to build our monuments back up. So this is not something that's going to happen just over this year alone. I think that part, though, more the Renaissance period will be, after the July 4th, 2026, when people are a lot more happy. People are seeing the effects of the tariffs and seeing the effects of the taxes eliminated. All that will happen on a choreographed time. And then we have all the Bill and Hillary stuff, and then all roads lead to Obama. Obama's back in the surface again. He's back popping up more and more and more. He had not been active a lot on his Twitter account. Now he's a lot more it's not real, but for people thinks that he's a lot more active. But look, here's another that proves it. Comey, right? The old school deep state. Oh boy, mudslinging. They get on their X account or whatever that had their big followings. Comey has 1.1 million followers on Twitter, X. He hasn't posted on there since June the 10th. Does that sound like the old school deep state? But see, the people in the target audience sees him on mainstream media saying, I'm innocent, bring this trial on. But why isn't he telling his 1.1 million followers? Why hasn't Obama or Michelle, Big Mike, why haven't they, with 154 roughly million followers combined, why haven't they said anything about Russiagate? Why haven't they defended Obama over Russiagate? So see, all this stuff shows you it's choreographed perfectly. Because if you were in the old school deep state, they would be. Oh, Trump's a liar, and Trump this, and Trump that, and Trump this. They ain't doing that, right? They'll say Obama said something about the Republican Party this and Trump administration, but it's not what you would think and what you would know if you knew what was going on, right? I mean, or if you didn't, you would think the polar opposite. You'd be like, well, hey, yeah, Ned defended himself over here, right? That's odd. So no, it's not odd. It's all strategic. It's all that. So, here we are, October basically might as well say the 13th, because all the 12th's already gone. So the 13th be a Monday. They have Bill slated for a deposition on the 14th. So, there's a reason why President Trump visually looks like he's leaving. And I mean, all this stuff is so choreographed to a T that, the other thing too is strategically, it's very important that people do know that's military, because if it looked dictatorship wise, if it looked like President Trump was making every one of these things on his own as a sitting president, then it would be perceived as a dictatorship. It would be perceived as taking the law into his hands. So a lot of this is choreographed that way, because the end goal, when you get on the flip side of all the bust and all the indictments, all the arrests, when we get on the flip side of that, when people see the evidence, and especially when people see not just sex trafficking and human, but when people see the child trafficking, when people see what they were doing with children, if that can't unite you, you might just be the enemy yourself, right? That, again, I think you should. Right now, the liberals who are I always joke, they should be in Tanzania or Uganda alone, right? They should make sure they're watching Survivor Man or Survivor to make sure that they could survive on their own, but they shouldn't be in the United States of America. If you can't unite over a child, you just might be a foreign entity yourself. So once we get through all that, then we can get to the happy days of this closure of what all this really is and was. And that's how all this stuff is choreographed this way. And it had to play out this way to clean it out, to reset it. But then when they disclose it, the American public, the general 80%, 85% will respect it and appreciate it. Not, if we were to stay in those days we'd never sustain. We can never sustain. And we already know, you and I both, anybody who knows the financial, big portion of the financial, what was going on with the deep state and the global alliance, I mean, they just kept raising taxes, raising cost of living, raising. I mean, we would have had a Dodge, which are now a Ram, I guess. We would have like a Dodge Pinto, though, worth like $200,000 if the deep state kept going, right? No one would be able to afford anything. And then they would do what? They would raise the cost of everything. They'd print more money that they never accounted for, and then they'd tax you and me and raise taxes. We could not have sustained. And that's when we would have really had a real civil war and a real war world. And no one wants to see that. No, nobody.
But remember what their rally call was. You will own nothing and be happy.
Yeah.
And something, all the people who are still sitting there watching TV, they don't own, they know nothing, and they're happy. Yeah. Ignorance is bliss. Absolute proof of that. But I know you got things to do, and I want to be respectful of your time. As always, it's been a fantastic conversation. For all of you who've been sitting here and wondering what this little QR code is in the upper right-hand corner, as you know, our good buddy Louis Herms is running for governor of California. And anybody who would like to help Louis along, contribute to his campaign, it's right up there. And along with that, not to let this go because it's very near and dear to my heart, and Derek also, and anybody who's really in this movement for the reason of the movement, they're still getting ready to do this ARC training down in Florida in November. Anybody who wants to participate, you can contact them there. If you want to contribute, as we're raising money, get people trained so that they don't have to lay out the $650 that it costs to get trained, that helps, because all these people will be trained to recognize kids and people who are being trafficked and to help to get them away from their traffickers and to be able to go and rehabilitate them and get them back into the world. So any help you can give on either part is a wonderful thing. And once again, Derek, fantastic show. I want to thank you again for your time. And of course, none of this would be possible without the lovely Kat, Kerry, Claudia, and Doug, because without them, we're just two guys sitting here talking to each other. So again, thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. We have another great show coming up next Sunday. I hope you'll tune in for that. In the meantime, have a wonderful week. Be kind to each other. And donate to one of those two things. Because I ain't getting any of it. It's going directly to those causes. And every penny of it is going to those causes. So everybody have a great week. Derek, again, thank you. Everybody, we'll see you next week. Have a good night.